Welcome back, gaming nerds. Thank you for joining me on yet another episode of Nerd Space Games. This time we're going to do something completely different than we have ever done on the show before. This is a new series, a newly established series I'm going to start on the channel. Hopefully it works out. I really like the idea of it. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of it. But basically, it's going to be known as a survival horror podcast. And this is the first ever episode of the survival horror podcast. Now, before I get into the details of what the survival horror podcast is and what to expect with future episodes, I want to go over some housekeeping details first. There's a lot to talk about and a lot of changes coming to Nerd Space Games, thanks to you guys, actually, because a lot of these changes are to make more interesting content for you guys, but keep it a little bit more organized and professional for you guys, so that way you can keep up with what type of content you personally want to watch every single day of the week. And hopefully once everything gets worked out, we will have something for you every single day of the week for Nerd Space Games. So let's go over those housekeeping details before I get to the official survival horror podcast episode. Like I said, there's a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to dive straight down into some of the housekeeping details, starting with the future of Nerd Space Games. And let's talk about the list videos, because I feel like that this is probably the most important part of Nerd Space. This is where most of you guys pretty much found me, because you've seen those list videos, those ranking videos I do on the channel. And I have a schedule for you guys, so that way you guys know when to expect every single episode on the channel. So starting as of literally this week, ideally I'm going to release a new list video every single weekday of the week. So that means Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. I will be releasing a list video, a ranking video. And more importantly, every Monday and every Friday, I'm going to keep it Resident Evil related. And the reason why I'm doing that is because Resident Evil is my favorite video game franchise. And it seems like you guys kind of attached to that. You guys kind of feel that coming from me, as you can see. And I feel like talking more about Resident Evil is what actually helped this channel get to where it's at. So I don't want to leave Resident Evil fans in the dark. I know a lot of you guys came to this channel because of Resident Evil. So I want to try to bring 1 or 2 videos per week for you guys personally for that reason. So expect a Resident Evil related list video every Monday and Friday. That might change some point in the future, mainly because I might run out of list ideas and I might start reaching out to you guys for some alternate list ideas for Resident Evil related content. But as of right now, expect Resident Evil content regarding the list videos on Mondays and Fridays. Also, I want to give you guys a heads up. I mostly lean heavier towards survival horror games when it comes to my content over any other games. And that's just because survival horror is my passion. You can pretty much tell just by looking at my channel that I seem to talk more about survival horror than anything else. That doesn't mean you're not going to get other game content. Like I did a lot of stuff actually on Final Fantasy 16, and Spider-Man 2 is my most anticipated game, so I'm going to do a lot of content on Spider-Man. But at least it gives you an idea that, hey, okay, I'm probably going to see more survival horror than I would other games. So just keep that in mind as my content is released. The last thing I want to mention when we talk about the list videos, I need to point out something that I'm sure you guys probably pointed out already. I've seen some comments on previous videos regarding this issue, and that is the fact that I haven't really talked much about Silent Hill. So I want to explain myself there. The reason why I haven't talked much about Silent Hill is because I am currently replaying every video game in the franchise. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I haven't played most of the Silent Hill games in a really long time. And then there are some games in the franchise I've never even played. Like, get this, I've never played Silent Hill 4 The Room. I don't know why I've never played this game, but I haven't. So before I start doing lists on all the different Silent Hill games, including a ranking for the entire series, I really want to get through every single game first, and then you'll see more Silent Hill content coming in the future. Now let's move on to the survival horror podcast. What is the survival horror podcast? Because I can tell you, every single survival horror podcast episode is not going to be like this one. This one, for one, is not live, and I do want this show to be live eventually. Probably starting next week, if not the following week, we will be doing a live show, and that's what the survival horror podcast is going to be about. I also want to bring in guests, but I'll get to that in just a moment. So the survival horror podcast, basically, it's going to air every single Saturday at 9 p.m. And like I mentioned earlier, it is going to be live most of the time. It's also going to be one of the very few videos that I am on camera. I don't see a reason for me to be on camera on the list videos. Unless you guys want me to, I can start appearing on camera on the list videos. But the Survival Horror Podcast is probably the one and only time during the week that you'll see me on camera. And it's pretty much going to focus on all the different news and rumors and leaks relating to any kind of horror game, survival horror game or horror in general, because I love my scary, terrifying video games, and I want to have a day of the week dedicated just talking about all the rumors, leaks, news regarding those games. But it's also going to be like a fun, casual video that's going to be about me interacting with, hopefully, guests that I bring onto the show, other YouTube content creators that focus their content on survival horror games. I want to get them on the show, and I want to have like interactions between us so that way you guys can connect with different personalities around YouTube that all focus on what I love and what they love, and hopefully what you love if you're here, and that is survival horror games. So expect guests on future episodes of Survival Horror Podcast. Again, this show is just starting. I don't know where it's going to go immediately. I think we're going to start with probably smaller guests, probably other smaller channels, because my channel itself is also a small channel, if you haven't noticed. So I'm probably going to start with just meeting other YouTube creators that are a little bit smaller like myself, and kind of having that interaction with you guys and them and just having fun together. Which brings me to a very interesting point. If you are a YouTube content creator and you focus on survival horror and you're at least 18 years of age, then reach out to me if you want to be on the show. I would love to have you on the show. I want to get as many of you guys on the show as possible. Doesn't matter how small your channel is, as long as you are doing active content, you seem like you're a good personality, you seem like you're dedicated to your channel, then I want you on the show. So if you're interested in, you can either just type up in the comments, send me a link to your channel, and I'll reach out to you. Or you can email me at nerdspace1991@gmail.com and just reach out to me. Give me your link to your channel. Give me some details about yourself, and we'll get you on the channel as soon as possible if you're interested. You are not required to be on camera. However, I highly recommend it. I feel like it's a better way to kind of connect with the audience. So you don't have to have a camera to be on the show, but again, it's definitely recommended. Now, I talked about mainly what the podcast is going to be about, talking about news, rumors, leaks, all that stuff, getting guests on the show, and the fact that it's going to be a live show at some point, probably starting next week. The last thing I want to point out is that it's going to be a fun and casual experience, and we're going to do like a Q&A session at the end of each episode if we're getting enough audience members. So basically, you guys can send in your questions, and we can get those questions answered at the end of the episode. That being said, obviously this video is not a live video, so I can't read questions in the future before this video goes up, obviously. So what we're going to do instead, if you guys have questions for me, it could be about my personal life, could be about survival horror, could be my love for video games, whatever questions you have, as long as it's kind of PG, you know what I mean, then I will gladly answer them on next week's episode. So just hit up the comments, let me know any questions you have, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. The last and final thing I want to announce before we move on with the actual episode of Survival Horror Podcast is that we do have plans to do something on Sunday as well. I mentioned how I want to bring content to you guys every single day of the week, and that doesn't exclude Sundays. Sundays, I actually am working on something. I just don't know when it's going to be finished. I'll go ahead and tell you what it is now. It's pretty much a video game themed Jeopardy. I don't know how exactly I'm going to do it yet. I'm still kind of working it out. But ideally, what I want to do is have every single week, every single Sunday, a Jeopardy game posted, which basically is a trivia for your video game knowledge, and you guys can test yourself on specific video game themes. For example, the very first episode that will air at some point in time once it's completed will be a Resident Evil themed Jeopardy game. It's just pretty much dumb fun just to have a cool way to kind of test your knowledge with, in this case, Resident Evil and other video games. So I think it will be really cool and fun, and we'll see how it goes, but I'm really interested in seeing how it does, and I will keep you guys posted on when to expect that first premiere of Jeopardy. Okay, I know that was a ton of housekeeping news. Hopefully you guys are still with me. Let's get to the official episode of Survival Horror Podcast, episode 1, the very first episode of the series. Hopefully it has a good start. We'll see how it goes from here. But on episode 1, the first thing I want to talk about is Resident Evil 2 Remake, because earlier in the week we were told that it officially broke a record. It is officially the highest selling Resident Evil game in the franchise, and that is fantastic. It has sold 12.6 million copies and makes it the best-selling Resident Evil game in this series. And what's actually really interesting about this is that it's actually the third best-selling game by Capcom itself. And I'd love to know if you guys can guess this before I say it. Can you guess what other two games surpasses Resident Evil 2 Remake in terms of the top seller? I'll give you guys a moment. Just take a breather, take a moment, take a beat. All right, here we go. If you haven't figured it out, the answers are Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise. Should be a no-brainer since the Monster Hunter franchise has already been probably Capcom's biggest franchise. It's always the one that's getting the most attention, even more so than Resident Evil. But yeah, these games sold more than Resident Evil 2 Remake. However, Resident Evil 2 Remake is doing pretty good to be the best seller in the franchise after only releasing back in 2019, I think it was. That's a huge deal. Now, I have 2 questions to pose to you guys, and I'll give you my opinion on it in just a moment. But do you think it deserves that spot? Does Resident Evil 2 Remake deserve to be the highest selling Resident Evil game? So I'll answer that one first. And in my opinion, yes, it does. I don't think it's going to last, and I will get to that in just a moment. But I feel like Resident Evil 2 Remake was such a great love letter to the Resident Evil fans. I was nervous coming into that game because honestly, when I heard about the over-the-shoulder third-person mode, I was not feeling it. I was really scared it was going to take away so much from the original game. And don't get me wrong, the original game is still my favorite game in the franchise. I really love the original Resident Evil 2 game. That being said, the remake surprisingly caught me off guard, and I really liked it to the fact that it's like my third favorite game of the entire series. So I'm very happy to see that the second remake is the highest seller in the franchise, and it definitely deserves that spot in my opinion. Now, the next question I have for you guys is, do you think Resident Evil 4 Remake has what it takes to surpass Resident Evil 2 Remake? Now, in my opinion, I think hell yeah. I think Resident Evil 4, the original game, was already one of the highest selling games of the franchise. And they definitely continuously remastered that game and brought it on the next gen consoles every single time a new generation release. So that game was just so extremely popular, and it's probably one of the more popular games of the franchise. For a lot of people, it's their favorite. And while Resident Evil 4 isn't my favorite just because it's more of an action horror than a survival horror in my opinion, I still think it's going to surpass Resident Evil 2 Remake because I think Resident Evil 4 Remake was fantastic. And if Resident Evil 2 Remake was able to surpass all of the other Resident Evil games and become the top seller, there's no doubt in my mind that Resident Evil 4 Remake is going to do the same thing, guys. We just have to own up to the fact that that's a no-brainer. It's going to happen. Whether you're a fan of Resident Evil 4 or you're not, the remake is going to surpass the second one, in my opinion. But let me know in the comments, do you guys think it's going to surpass it, regardless if you like the game or not? Do you think it's going to surpass Resident Evil 2 Remake eventually? The next thing I want to talk about is Resident Evil 4 Remake, ironically, and we're going to talk about the Separate Ways DLC because, honestly, we keep getting more and more data leaks regarding Resident Evil 4 Remake, and that is relating to the Separate Ways DLC. Now, we've pretty much already been hinted at to the fact that we're going to get Separate Ways DLC. It's just about when we're going to get it. We even got teased in the game itself. You can definitely see teases in there, including a line from Ada Wong and Leon himself. Leon specifically says, this is where we go our separate ways. Yeah, obviously we're getting a Separate Ways DLC. The question is when? Back in March, we had some data mine leaks that kind of hinted to the fact that, okay, maybe the DLC is a little bit closer than we thought, because some of the achievements on Steam were added to the game and they were locked, and you don't get to see what the achievements say or anything like that, but we've seen that they added a bunch of achievements. They weren't related to the Mercenaries mode that was added, so obviously there's a new DLC coming for them to add all these different achievements. And there was more recent data mine leaks that apparently hint to the fact that there's going to be an update on the main game, which isn't completely like crazy, or that is completely normal. But there's also another data mine link that says that there was an update to a DLC. Now that could be relating to the mercenary mode. We didn't get any kind of specs or any updates on that specifically, but it could also relate to Separate Ways DLC, which I feel like we're going to get an announcement probably next month. I think we're going to see Separate Ways DLC announced at the Tokyo Game Show, which is at the end of September. That's my guess. Let me know in the comments, when do you guys think we are getting Separate Ways DLC, and when do you think we're going to get the reveal of Separate Ways? The next topic, I know a lot of people probably don't consider a true survival horror. I don't consider a true survival horror, but it is horror, and I mentioned how we're going to talk about horror games as well, and that is Dead by Daylight. Now, if you don't know me that well, and I probably haven't mentioned this on the show, so you guys probably wouldn't know this, but I'm actually a huge fan of Dead by Daylight. I play it at least like 3 or 4 times a week. I actually adore this game, and this game has been out for years, but they continuously keep bringing more and more content to the game, to the point where they bring in like really cool IPs, horror IPs into the game. Perfect example would be like Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger or Leatherface being brought into the game. And the most recent announcement we got earlier this month was the fact that we were getting Xenomorph from the Alien movies into Dead by Daylight. Well, we saw some gameplay footage and we got some updates on the perks and benefits of this package. First off, the killer, obviously, as I mentioned, is Xenomorph. The survivor is Ellen Ripley. Of course, no surprise there. But we have a really cool stage that is known as the Nostromo wreckage, which is pretty much the ship in the first movie, but like wrecked onto like a random planet or something. But what really has me interested are the abilities and the perks of the new killer, the Xenomorph. Because the Xenomorph actually has the ability to like crawl on the ground and kind of see like footsteps and hints to where survivors might be at. And then they can come back up from the ground and surprise the survivors and boom, get them quick. Not to mention it has a new perk known as, actually I don't remember what the perk is called, but apparently when you open a locker, it gives you like this ability where it makes any survivors nearby you scream, and it gives away their location. That's really cool. Seems a little overpowered to me, but seems really cool. And then the runner mode is probably the thing that interests me the most, because it allows the Xenomorph to run on all fours, and then it can attack with its tail up to about 5 meters, I think, or 4.6 meters, something like that, ahead of itself, which gives it more long range than most of the other killers in the game. However, you can take the Xenomorph out of the runner mode by attacking it with one of these flame turrets around the map. So the survivors, which is very unique to Dead by Daylight, but they actually have the ability to actually attack and fight back against the killer. And that's not really normal in most cases when it comes to Dead by Daylight. If you know anything about Dead by Daylight, it's pretty much a run and hide situation. However, you're extremely motivated to attack the killer in this one, so that way you can get them out of that mode so you don't get screwed over in runner mode. Overall, seems like a really interesting inclusion into Dead by Daylight. Definitely going to check it out when it releases. I think it releases on August 29th, so that is great. Definitely getting my hands on it. I'm picking up the package. I'll let you guys know my opinions once I get into the gameplay of it. But let me know what you guys think. Are you guys fans of Dead by Daylight? Do you guys want to see more Dead by Daylight content on the channel? I'd love to know that as well. Also, there was a showcase for THQ Nordic, and if you don't know who they are, that is the studio behind the Alone in the Dark remake, which is exactly why I'm bringing up on this episode of Survival Horror Podcast, and that is because we got 2 new teasers regarding the game. Nothing crazy, nothing insane, just showcasing more of the character development with the 2 main protagonists. So we get a teaser monologue with both Edward and Emily. That not really much to say about this game. What I'm really curious though, I want to talk to you guys, because I played the demo, I played it all the way through, and honestly, it didn't really impress me. I don't know what it was about this demo. I just didn't like the demo at all. I wish there was more combat for gameplay so I can see what the game really is going to be like, and I didn't really get that with the prologue demo. And that disappoints me, because I am really excited for this game. This franchise inspired Resident Evil, by the way, if you didn't know that. So I have a lot of high hopes for this game. The demo didn't win me over, but I'm curious, what do you guys think? Is this a game you guys are going to pick up on day one? Are you excited for this game? Did you enjoy the demo? Am I crazy for not liking the demo? Let me know in the comments. Speaking of game footage being released and revealed to the public, we get another we get another reveal from Fort Solis, which is a sci-fi survival horror game that I'm very much looking forward to, mainly because of its cast. It has both the voice actors for Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2, as well as Joel from the Last of Us games. So I'm really excited about this game. I'm really excited how it turns out. But they released 14 minutes of gameplay footage, and here's my problem. There was no combat in this gameplay footage at all. It was 14 minutes of really just kind of a walking simulator and some really cool and unique conversations between two primary protagonists of the game, Jack and Jessica. And it was cool seeing that relationship between Jack and Jessica, and it's definitely going to be fun to explore that relationship. It's, really cool to see all that. But I was surprised that with 14 minutes of gameplay, all you really showed us was just walking through a station and not really exploring any combat or anything like that. It makes me nervous for the game. I am really, really excited for this game. I can't wait to get my hands on it. But I hope it's going to be a little bit more interactive than what this trailer kind of made it seem like. And I'm pretty sure it is. I think maybe there's some kind of twist, or maybe they're trying to keep things, and kind of hid it from us for right now, so that way we are more surprised when we're playing the game. But let me know in the comments, what did you guys think about that 14 minutes gameplay that we got? Did it really turn you guys on into the fact of maybe picking this game up, or are you kind of like me and you're like, I wanted more out of this trailer? And the question of the week, I posted it earlier on in the week. It was, which Resident Evil game do you want to see remade the most? And I got surprisingly crazy outcomes for this poll, because I expected one of the situations to play out. So Code Veronica won this poll. It was definitely the most popular choice. That isn't surprising to me. It won with 61% of the votes saying that they want to see Code Veronica remade. I definitely agree with that. To me, Code Veronica is probably the most deserving, most needed of a remake, in my opinion. But what really surprised me is that Resident Evil 1 get a second remake actually got the second most votes on the poll, which 21% of the voters wanted to see the first Resident Evil game remade again. And that's crazy to me, because when I posted a video a little while back talking about 7 reasons why I think Capcom should remake Resident Evil 1, I got a lot of comments kind of like going against the idea, saying that Resident Evil 1 doesn't deserve a remake. It doesn't need it. It's not, the original remake is already near perfection. And I would agree with most of those arguments. The only thing is that you have a whole new generation of players that aren't fans of the fixed camera angles with tank controls. They're not a fan of that type of gameplay. I'm a huge fan of it. Obviously, Resident Evil 2, the original game, is my favorite game of all time. But they're not a fan the tank controls and fixed camera angles. And I felt like that there's a lot of Resident Evil fans, newer fans it seems like, that won't play those tank control games and won't experience those original Resident Evil games that really kind of start the series off. Especially that original one, Resident Evil 1. And that's the first starting point of the series. So I feel like it getting a remake would really help those fans out. I know a lot of you guys, myself included, probably feels like it doesn't need a remake, but it does make sense. And I think Capcom should do it to kind of appease those new generation fans. I'm really sad to see Outbreak not get that much love. I do think it's extremely unlikely that Outbreak gets a remake, just because Capcom has kind of failed again and again and again on doing multiplayer Resident Evil games. When you think about Reverse ReVerse and what's the other one? Resistance. Neither one of those did really that well. Resistance wasn't bad. ReVerse kind of a clusterfuck. But they didn't do that well. And I feel like Capcom needs to find the right mixture for these games if they're going to continue down the trend of trying to make these multiplayer games. And I don't want them to take a shot at Outbreak until they understand what they need to do with that game. But that's going to do it for this episode of Survival Horror Podcast. Guys, like I mentioned earlier, eventually I want to get some Q&As up in here. I want to get some guest YouTube content creators that focus on survival horror games. I want to get them on the channel to make it a little bit more interactive. This is going to be a live show at some point, probably going forward. Probably on the next episode will be a live show. And I want to interact with you guys more. But in the meantime, if you guys want to hit up the comments, let me know questions you have for me. It could be personal questions. You can ask what my favorite, video game from the PlayStation 4 is. I don't know. Ask me any questions you guys have personally. Hit up the comments, and I will answer them on the next episode of the Survival Horror Podcast. And again, keep an eye out because I plan on trying to get some guests on the show so that way it can be a little bit more interactive. And yeah, let me know what you guys thought about this formula. Let me know what you think about having a weekly show like this, and if it's worth this continuing on. I'll probably continue on for a few months just to see how it goes and to kind of go from there. But thanks again. If you guys watch this episode, really appreciate it. Consider joining our Patreon membership. We have 2 different tiers that you can join. More information for that is in the description, or you can head over to patreon.com/nerdspacegames, where you can join our Discord group by becoming a Patreon for just $2 a month, and you can interact with myself and other Patreons. But with that out of the way, guys, I will see you on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.